You've no doubt heard of the House of Horrors. That isn't where we are today. We're at the House of History in Malone with Ted Mills. How are you?
Just fine.
We are delighted to be at the House of History. For all the times I've driven through Malone and spent years growing up in Moira, which isn't very far away from here, I never heard of the House of History until a few days ago. So we have wildly anticipated this visit today because there's so much history in this area.
Yes, there is. There is, and the House of History is just one small piece of it. We have the Wilder Farm out in the country near Malone. We have a large number of historical organizations all through the county. You've been in Moira. They're doing Heritage Days in Moira, terrific events.
We were so happy to be there last year, and they made me the Grand Marshal of the parade, so I almost had to show up and rode very high in the back of a convertible while Calvin taped the parade, and we just had a wonderful time. Isn't it great to see these communities finally latching onto their history and bringing it up to the present time?
It's fine, yes.
It's really great. We've been to the Wilder Farm. We've watched it grow. I visited the Wilder Farm through my youth when it was just a farm. And then they finally decided to focus on that history and expand it and rebuild the barns out back. And so we've watched that grow over the last 4 or 5 years, and we're delighted to see that happen too. So.
Yes, and it's a terrific operation. They've done wonderful things over the last few years.
There are some awesome celebrations taking place here in the North Country during the year 2002. We just spent a few hours taping a gargantuan parade in the village of Messina. Calvin was there last Saturday, and then we went to interview his town historian at their little museum on East Orvis Street and had a good time there as they celebrate their 200th. And lo and behold, just a few miles down the road, you're celebrating your 200th as well.
That's right. Malone was settled 200 years ago this year by a bunch of folks from Vermont. Vermont was the seedbed for northern New York. A huge number of settlers came from there, and this town was virtually all Vermont people, at least 95% Vermont people, until perhaps 1825 or so. And at that point then we began to get a number of Irish folks coming in, particularly through Canada, and then a little later on quite a lot of French Canadians. So we have really a 4-point ethnic mix here. We have Native Americans, we have Vermonters, we have French Canadians and Irish, which compose the background of Malone and really of the whole of the northern part of the county.
Isn't that fantastic? It's great to find out where we've been. And speaking about where we've been, you haven't been here for very long. Strange as that may sound, as much as an expert as you are on area's history, and as much as your family is connected with the North Country, you spent a lot of your time in Chicago.
I grew up in the Chicago area. I've been a wandering professor all this time. And a year ago I came back to live in Belmont town just east of Malone.
Now your mom grew up not far from here.
That's right. She grew up in Belmont. As a little girl, I was walking one day on the road not far from where I live now, and I ran across a lady named Florence Merrill, who has since passed away. And Florence described to me, when she realized who my mother was, she said, "Oh yes, Lula and I used to slide down Kirby Hill over there." And she described the old barrel stave thing, the whole bit.
Oh, isn't that
So
great?
it's a fun place for me to be because I keep running across relatives, my mother's old friends on hilltops and valleys everywhere.
Most people would like to search out their roots, but they don't have the wherewithal and they don't take the time. But there's a lot of satisfaction in doing
Well,
that.
that's what we do in the House of History.
Yeah.
That is, our activity really is built around 2 primary emphases. One is genealogy and local history, and the other is the museum, in which we preserve a lot of the artifacts and the furnishings and other features of old Franklin County. But the genealogy folks are the larger group. They come in on just every afternoon. We have volunteers, I'm one of them, who take care of the research needs of people seeking out their families from Franklin County.
Isn't that terrific? And
Yeah,
it's great.
fun to do.
And talk about fun to do. You are in the process of restoring your mother's homestead in
Yes,
Belmont.
that's right.
Wow.
That's right. Yeah, it's an old log cabin built around 1850 beside a little brook called Thurber Brook.
It would have to be beside a little brook.
Well, of course, yes, right. Well, if you can't have it by a lake, it can at least be by a brook.
Yeah.
Right, and it's been fun. It's a lot of work to take an old building and make it winter worthy and suitable for living now, but it's been fun.
Now, we were just looking around the neighborhood. What beautiful old homes
Yeah.
you have back here, and I'm sure that many of our viewers, especially those not from the Malone area, have no idea that the House of History exists. But just if you're coming into Malone from our direction, from the Plattsburgh Chateauguay direction, just make a left at the Congregational Church on
That's it.
Clay Street. Keep going till you hit a right angle, and then you're on another street, and that's where you're located, right around the corner on the left.
That's right. We're just a block off Main Street. It's easy to find. One of these days we'll get signs up when we have more volunteers or fewer visitors or something, but it's easy to find.
You know what I like to see, and something we've promoted on our little corner, and Calvin has for many years, taping these programs since the 1980s. I love to see areas pick up on their history and trying to bring the history to the masses. Get the people who live around here to drop in and see what this is all about.
I think that used to be harder than it is now. I think there's a general groundswell of historical interest around the country, and we certainly see it here. Lots of interest. It's been stimulated, of course, by the bicentennial events in Malone, but it's true all over the county. There's just a lot of history going on. Historic Saranac Lake is an organization that Mary Hotelling runs in Saranac Lake, and they've been concentrating on things like the Bartok cabin, where Bartok did some of his composing, and the Trudeau Sanitarium Research Lab. They've gotten lots of backing. It's just a groundswell of interest in historical things.
We'd love to see it. Of course, in Plattsburgh, it's the Battle of Plattsburgh, or the Battle of Lake Champlain.
Sure.
And I've mentioned many times that that battle was fought on September 11th, 1814, and now we have a new significance to that date as of last year, tragically.
Yes, well, Jim Bailey made the comment last year. He sent around a letter in which he said, now we have two September 11ths.
Yeah.
And we honor the one while we honor the second.
Jim Bailey's a tremendous person and a good friend, retiring from his day job this year with the county office, finance office. But he's and we have interviewed Jim on numerous occasions.
Good.
And had a great time doing it. Now, some of these homes around us, before we go inside, you mentioned this home to my immediate right rear was pretty famous.
Congressman Kilburn lived there. Congressman Kilburn was a very important figure in this area, and of course he was an important congressman too, from a federal standpoint. That house now has been restored and is a bed and breakfast that Suzanne Hogan runs. And so we have a very good arrangement here. Folks can come and stay there while they use our facilities next door.
Isn't that
It's
great?
a wonderful old house.
Well, let's talk about the house that houses the House of History.
Yes, can we walk back a little so we can
Why
get a
don't we?
side view of the whole house here? This was built in 1863 and 4 and is really an elegant old townhouse. A few years ago we took a big porch off the front, which was not original and was falling apart, and restored the original structure with the little balcony and everything. But you can see from the shapes of the windows and the decorations and the type of dental work along underneath the eaves, that's all special. It isn't functional really, it just is an item of beauty. The people who built this house put a great deal of thought into it. Now from the side you can see that the house has a step-down structure. There's the square brick large family portion of the house, and then behind it there is a step-down section which is also brick, which is servants' quarters and the kitchen and the areas where the servants operated. And then behind that is a lower shed with a little a privy a three-holer, which tells you that it was a
Big
very
time.
elegant,
Oh, sure.
very elegant house.
Yeah.
But so you have a three-level structure to it that really represents the social organization of the time. You had the family, the relatively well-to-do family, the servants whom they could afford to maintain, the inside servants, and then you had the outside shed and, of course, the carriage house in back, which the outside servants managed. By the way, this whole line of thought comes from a little book by Robert McGowan, which we have here. Robert did a marvelous account of architecture in the Adirondack foothills, and this is one of the houses that he features in it, and he gives that little sort of social history account. He mixes it with the architecture. Great book.
So this house, as it looks now, it looks essentially as it did 140 years ago.
Yes, yes, it's as very little is different. Well, of course, there were no electric wires coming in, but otherwise, it's very similar. We put indoor plumbing in, a few things like that.
I bet the original occupants would be thrilled to know that you've turned it into a museum, too.
I expect.
Any little ghosties hanging around here?
None that have said anything to me. You can go prowl up and back if you want and see if you can stir any up.
Oh, I write ghost stories, so I always ask people, do you have any hanging around, Did they cook your supper last night, or did you smell bacon this morning? No, this is a great place, and we're glad that you came back. What were you about to say?
Oh, I was going to say that before we go inside, these two houses have a certain connection because Mrs. Kirk, who lived here after she died, we acquired the house in the 1970s. But before that, Mrs. Kirk lived here, and Mrs. Kilburn was there after Congressman Kilburn passed away. And the story is that these two women would appear, Mrs. Kirk at that window there, the back one, and Mrs. Kilburn at one of the two back windows over there. The story is that these two women would signal each other at 11 o'clock every morning as a way of checking on one another.
To make sure they were okay.
That's right.
Isn't that wonderful?
I thought it was a charming story.
Oh, I love it. What a great story. Now, did you teach for a few years, did you tell me, or many years?
Yes, I'm a sociologist, and I've taught at the University of Texas and the University of Connecticut and all over.
Where did you attend school?
University of Chicago originally, and then my doctorate is from Harvard.
And you came back.
Oh, yeah, that's my privilege.
This area should be so delighted that you came back.
Well, they've been very kind to me.
Have they really?
Oh, yeah.
So you don't actually teach anymore, except
No.
here. This is certainly a teaching capacity.
Oh, there are teaching
You're
things.
You're teaching
that go
us
on
today.
there.
We've learned a great deal already.
No, I'm basically a learner. That's what professors really are. They
That's
teach.
what we all are.
They
really.
teach for a living, but we're basically learners, and that's what I've been doing since I came back, just learning up a storm. It's a great place to be.
Had you kept up with the history of this area while you were in Chicago?
Not in Chicago, but the last 20 years, I've been coming to this area that is the Belmont area as a summer person occasionally, not long periods, but during that time I became very interested in this area and why people come here, why the settlers came here, and then why they stayed. And then, since a lot of them also left, why they left. And those questions of why they came, why they stayed, these are migration questions. And we're not talking about individuals like you and me, we're talking about whole populations moving. And so the question is, why did this happen? So I've been thinking about that for about 20 years, and this year I got a chance to work on it.
Oh, isn't that great? Well, what do you say we go inside and take a look around?
All right, let's do.
Let's do. I love old homes, and I love old homes that have been turned into museums. And we all like money. And as I was camping with my family at Coles Creek, not too far from here, the other side of Messina, about 14 miles, I read a little piece in the paper saying that Assemblyman Chris Ortloff was responsible for getting a check to the House of History in Malone for $5,000. And don't you think the people here were proud to receive the check? They have it displayed on one of the antique chairs right here in the parlor of the House of History. it's nice to have enough money to continue with the building renovations and all there is to do to preserve the fine history of this Malone area. I have Bonnie Damaris with me. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
I don't think we've ever met before, but it's about time.
Yes, it is.
Bonnie, are you from Malone originally?
No, I'm from Amsterdam, New York. I came up here when I was going to start to teach.
And you were brought up in Amsterdam, went to college where?
In Oneonta, and Plattsburgh, and Potsdam.
You went to Plattsburgh State for a while?
Got my master's from Plattsburgh.
Well, terrific. I live in Morrisonville, just in case we need the geography lesson, which is only 4.5 miles west of Plattsburgh. But how did you end up back here in Malone?
When my father was camping around the area with his parents, so that was like way back in the 1920s or 30s, they came to Malone, and they came to the fair, the county fair. And they thought
Malone
that
Fair, or as they call it now, the Franklin County
exactly.
Fair.
And they thought that Malone was such a lovely place that years later, when I was ready to get out on my own, they suggested I come here. And my father brought me, actually, so that I would see it.
That suggestion was underlined by the fact that you were riding in the car.
Yes, that's right.
So you taught here?
I taught here for 33 years, just retired lately.
Did you really? At Franklin Academy? Or?
No, I taught at Harrison, Lamberton, St. Joe's, and Davis,
Oh, my goodness.
and summer school at Flanders.
Did you really?
Yes, I
so
did.
you made the rounds
I
and
did.
influenced the lives of about 100,000 young
Well,
people.
it seems that way when you look backwards in time, yes.
Well, what grades did you teach?
I worked in substituting with pre-K, and I taught all the way up to third.
Did you really? And obviously, you're delighted having had that life experience teaching.
I love
here.
teaching. I really did. And I like coming here, and when the fourth grades come, to tell them some more about, their local history. And I used to bring my first graders here when I was at St. Joe's. We would walk over and see some of this house. Of course, we didn't get to do any of the activities they have for the older children, but my little people were happy to see everything.
You know, Calvin and I are especially thrilled to point out so often that in recent years it is a requirement to include a piece of local history in the grade school curriculum. And this makes us very happy because you have to start with the kids.
That's right. And I think that they should let the smaller people come to at least walk through places like this and then come back later and do the activities, and it builds on what they saw first. Because if they don't see anything first, then this is a real shock, and then they can't really take it all in. That's my feeling.
Well, that's a good feeling. We have a wonderful historic old home called the Kent DeLord House in Plattsburgh that untold thousands of young people have traipsed through at one time or another. And for some reason, up until fairly recently, most of their parents have been excluded from that just because they didn't take the time. But as Ted mentioned when we were standing outside this glorious old home in Malone, now called the House of History, there is a groundswell of interest in local history all over the United States, and I think it's fantastic. We in Plattsburgh are looking forward to the 200th anniversary of the Battle of Lake Champlain, or the Battle of Plattsburgh, on September 11th, coming up in 2014. But now you are in the middle of your bicentennial here
Yes,
in
we are,
Malone.
yes. And I guess it was very well attended.
Calvin did the parade. He almost ran out of tape doing the parade in Messina, which I heard lasted a total of 2 hours and a half, and he has about 1 hour and 15 minutes on tape, which will be shown as part of that particular memory-making video in our little corner, and that's pretty terrific. So you've been here at this house for...
I've only been coming here for 2 years. As soon as I retired, then I got involved here.
Have you always loved history yourself?
I had a hard time with history in school.
Well, we all did that.
But I think when I was growing up, if we were able to go into places, then when you see it, then when you read about it later on, you can make a connection, and then it's easier.
That's great. You know, I'm one of those people who has to stop and read every historical marker along the way. I was bringing my wife way out to the Jones Road in Chattagay to drop her off for a trip to an anniversary down south today. I saw a historical marker for an old fort that was connected with the Battle of Plattsburgh on a corner out in the middle of nowhere, and I had to stop my car and read it just to put it in the memory bank so that data will be available for
That's right.
future reference.
So you can win Trivial Pursuit someday.
Yeah, that
yes.
too. So, tell us a little bit more about where we're standing and then take us on our grand tour of this wonderful old home.
Well, right now you're in the parlor. This would have been the place where the family would have brought any of their guests, and this is also the room that children were not allowed in unless there were guests. So the children could, as they came in to go upstairs to the room perhaps, they'd stop at the archway there, but they wouldn't come in unless they were given permission to come in. And if they came in, then they were to sit down and sit still and be quiet and don't talk unless they're spoken to.
Seen and not heard, yes, I do remember that phrase from my own childhood. I'm drinking in the wonders of this room, from the old stove to the old radiators to the a wonderful piano, or is it a clavichord?
That's a piano. It was ordered by someone in North Bangor in the early 1800s, and it was brought over from Vermont on Lake Champlain in the winter, slid over on the ice.
Really? On a sleigh? Mm-hmm. They had a regular taxi service on the ice in those days, and the horses would pull you over, and the passengers would be covered with buffalo robes.
And that's one of the things the children like to think about, is bringing that piano over on the ice instead of coming on the roads, and not realizing that there weren't any decent roads to bring a piece of that weight. So how much easier it would be to slide it over.
There were a few ancient ferries back in those days, but they were hit and miss, and they certainly couldn't operate in the wintertime.
No.
Just looking around at the work on the ceiling, around the light right directly over top of Calvin's head. Isn't that incredible?
That's amazing. I'm happy that I'm not the maid that would have had to clean that.
And the archway, the entryway. Sometimes parlors in those days had sliding doors. This one probably did not, but it's pretty fancy.
It's very fancy, but with the open section there, it would be difficult to heat.
But in parlors back in those days, were not, as you said before, were not even used by the family most of the time.
That's right. That's right. So right behind me here, there would have been a door, and we're thinking that stove was over here. And then when they were going to have company in here, they'd close that door, and then the heat from the stove remained here. But when they were going to be in the dining room eating, then they'd close the other door, and then the heat would go in the dining room.
And the organ is a piece of nostalgia for me. We've seen them. This is a pump organ. You can see the pumps, and you see the knee. These things are operated by your knees, and homes had them. Little churches had them.
And all the girls in those days were supposed to learn how to play both of these, so that when they were invited into the parlor, they could entertain.
They could entertain. Isn't that great? I love this clock. Every time I see a clock like this, I drool.
This is a grandfather clock.
It certainly is.
Named because the grandfather was the one who was supposed to wind it. Grandfather or dad. Not any of the children, but some of the adult males. And here's the key inside here. And you would crank that up at night, and then you have to set your weights, and then the difference of the weights makes the workings keep going.
These are heavy lead weights, as you can easily tell. I have a grandfather clock in my front hall, and every once in a while it's got an ancient chain, of course, and one of the links will expand during the night, and one of those weights will hit the floor, and I will leap out of bed thinking a bomb or an earthquake has struck my house. So it's currently unattached.
Yes, I'm sure.
But it's a wonderful old clock. I wonder if anybody has dated it.
I have no idea. In all of my reading, I don't know.
It's awfully nice, and it's not totally dissimilar from the one I have. This is a great room. Where would you like to take us next? You want to talk about some of the things in here?
This is, it's covered with sort of plush velour, but it's filled with horsehair.
Horsehair as they were.
And this is where the children would have had to sit. The only thing is, in those days, all of their clothes were starched, so that made their clothes slippery. And this is slippery. So well, they had to ended up sitting on the edge because they pushed their toes into the carpet to keep them up so that they wouldn't shoot off and make a problem.
What a great story. And you know, this obviously hasn't been refinished. That's original
No,
coloring.
that is, yes. But this is what is interesting to the children, and I guess perhaps interesting to some other people. Usually in those days, they had this really decorative glass that they would put wherever with their flowers or on the dining room table. And this glass was called Days End glass. And that meant that any of the scraps left over from making colored things like this, they put into whatever, and then they got something like this. And originally this was used for like every day because being called Day's End, it was the scrap glass. And then as they had people coming in, they thought that this was ever so much nicer than that. So then that started to stay on the shelf and this appeared on the table.
Isn't that wonderful? And now, you know, of all the things I've read about glass, I never heard of Days End glass. So I'm getting a liberal education today, that's for sure. Oh, that's great. All right, I'm following you.
All right.
Oh, look at this piece. Oh, look at this desk.
This is called a bureau desk, and it wouldn't have been in the parlor because this is where Dad would have kept his cash when he had to pay the household accounts, and because it's right around from the front door, it probably would have been in the library or maybe in a bedroom somewhere. Because when the maid would answer the door, here this would be with the money box, and they didn't dare to leave that right there. But what's nice for the children is when they see this sampler on the wall. This was made by someone who was 14. And what they did is, as soon as, like as early as 5 years old, the girls would learn how to sew. And as they got better, they made increasingly more difficult samplers. And when they got to the point where they could make a sampler like this and have it come out correctly, then they were included in the mending and sewing that was necessary for the family to keep going.
I just have to look closer and see the date, 1831.
Mm-hmm.
We were fortunate enough to see a large group of beautiful samplers at the little museum in Chazy, the Alice Minor Museum in Chazy. Mm-hmm. These little museums in municipalities across the North Country are awesome treasures. And if we can inspire some of the people viewing this program to grab their kids and their moms and dads and grandparents and instead of going to the beach one day this summer, come and visit your local museum. I think we would have accomplished something.
Well, one problem is that a lot of people view history as being dull and dry, and that they feel automatically that their children won't want to do that. And yet, as soon as the children come in, you can just see them just going in all directions. They don't know what to look at first because it's so wonderful.
It's not dull and dry the way you present it today, Bonnie, that's for sure. Oh, this is terrific. We love this room. We could spend all day here, but I'm sure there's a lot more to see and do in the House of History in Malone. Look at this. Look at this.
Now, that's one of the smaller sideboards.
Oh, isn't that incredible? That sideboard might predate this house.
I think. I have no idea.
I believe it might by the looks of it. I am in awe of that sideboard. No, you don't know if anybody's done the history of it yet.
I don't know. No.
Oh, that's incredible. Isn't it reminiscent of the Middle Ages, Calvin? What would this be up here?
Now, somebody brought that in. That's the infant Jesus that they had used way back in those days in any of their, celebrations, especially Christmas. But because that would be the kind of infant they used back then, we have it here.
Isn't that amazing?
Because that's porcelain rather than, plastic.
This is, the staircase.
Mm-hmm.
The staircase. Oh, this is something that people who are building homes today can only dream of. Occasionally we get to go inside an old home like this, which has been converted into a funeral home in some community, because very often modern funeral directors will purchase the most elegant old house in the community for that purpose.
Right. This is a melodeon.
This is a melodeon.
Mm-hmm. And a melodeon is similar to a little piano or spinet. And this one was used to go to various hunting camps and whatever on the weekends. They put this on a sled or on a wagon and take this for the religious services at the outlying camps.
There aren't too many melodeons left. There are a few collectors, and they're a beautiful piece of equipment, and I believe, like a harpsichord, that the strings are plucked in a melodeon, or am I wrong? Or don't you know?
I really don't know.
It has that harpsichord sound, a melodeon does.
Since I've been coming here, this is the first time I've seen a melodeon. I had never seen
when I
one.
lived in Moira, not very far away from here, back long years ago in the 1950s, a gentleman whose name has long escaped into the ethers was a collector and restorer of melodeons, and that's where I first heard the term and saw him buying and selling them. But I haven't seen one since, so see? And who would this gentleman be?
I wish I knew. I've asked everybody. Nobody knows. Friend of the family, we just tell everyone.
Isn't that amazing? Almost a little bit like John Brown, doesn't he, Calvin?
Yeah.
Yeah, almost like a John Brown who was attached to the North Country in more than one way during the days of the Underground Railway.
Doesn't have the wild eyes, though.
No, John Brown had those wild eyes in every picture I've ever seen of him, that's for sure.
That's right.
So what would this room, would this be the dining room?
This is the dining room, but it was also at the same time the living area. When it wasn't, when they weren't eating, they also did whatever they're gathering in here because the parlor was only used for guests. So there's once again a really giant sideboard there.
Oh, that's one of the beauties.
And on the top it has a kerosene lamp with an etched glass globe. And the reason that they changed into etched glass was that it sort of softened the light so that you could have several of those lights around without having it being so glary in your face.
I dare say that many of our viewers have never seen so ornate a kerosene lamp in their lives. That is a gem.
That is beautiful.
And old mirrors. I love old mirrors. That's an old mirror of beveled glass that probably does date back to
I'm
when
sure
this
it
house
does.
was built.
I'm sure it does. The etched glass globe gives a kind of a cozy feeling rather than,
But it does. Have you ever lit it?
I haven't personally lit it, but I have one at my camp.
Oh, do you
Yes.
really? Where's your camp?
It's just south of Lake Claire at Fish Creek.
Oh, boy. I don't think there are many people who've been around the North Country very long who don't know about Fish Creek.
Yes.
I have to tell you, I haven't been there for well over 50 years, but we used to go camping there way back when.
It's very changed now.
I have to tell you also that this house is tastefully and beautifully decorated. Did you have anything to do with
No, I didn't. And a lot of the things, of course, are donated from people or their families. That the things came from that period, but it's repapered in whatever the way it would have been in those times.
Do you know Larry House?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, Larry and his wife, of course, lived in Plattsburgh for many years before they came back to Malone, and they're very interested and attached, or at least they were when we did our last show there with the Wilder homestead.
Yes, I also work there.
Do you really?
Yes, I do.
I should have guessed.
I'm Almanza Wilder when I'm at the farm.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, I'm Almanza.
Well, we kind of like that place too. We've gone back there several times. We've talked to the people there, and we've watched it grow. And glad to see people coming there to look it over.
And more are coming as they find out, word of mouth. Yeah.
I remember, as I told Ted, when it was just a home and nobody was paying any attention to it. All of a sudden, people said, "This is a big part of Americana."
That's right. Well, if it hadn't been for Dorothy Smith and her daughter, we still wouldn't really realize.
That's true.
It hadn't been for Michael Lane.
Yes,
Oh, yeah,
that's
that
true.
too.
Yes.
Bless his memory, that's for sure. Is this a dumbwaiter, or what is this?
That's called a pass-through. And what happens is...
Oh, a pass-through. Okay, I gotcha. Oh, look at this.
The maid who worked in here never went past the doorway to do any chores in there, and anybody, the cook and any of her helpers, never came through the door to work in here. So she passed through dirty dishes, or they passed through the meals, and everybody had their own, work to do, and nobody took on anybody else's, evidently.
Aren't you thrilled to come into a place like this and find that massive renovations had not taken place to modernize it?
Yes.
Because it's so hard to
I
go
would
backwards.
love to have lived here the way it is right now.
Oh, wouldn't you? And wouldn't we both? And I can tell by the gleam in your eye and the smile on your face that we both would enjoy that time.
Just to, go up and down that beautiful staircase. And when somebody comes to the door, and I could just feel myself just going down elegantly and opening the door.
I think when you do develop a passion for history, you can, in some measure, learn to transport yourself back in time. And sometimes it's kind of an uncanny facility. And I've mentioned it on this show and many times in my newspaper column. When I go into historic homes, I open my pores.
And
And
soak it right in.
when I go to Gettysburg, I open my pores.
I haven't been to Gettysburg. That's next.
Bonnie, get in your car. I can just picture you part of the reenactment team down
Well,
there.
I am next weekend.
Are you really?
Yep.
Isn't that terrific?
Yep.
But it's good. If we do nothing else in these programs, I hope we engender a passion for history. So that people, no matter what age they are, they don't have to be college graduates. They don't have to have been former, college professors or teachers for 3.5 decades.
There you go.
The process of learning. Ted says he's a learner. We're all learners. I think that's part of what our mission is on this hunk of mud.
Well, one of the things that we have to do is just at least offer it to people, and then let them come in and tell them about it, and then it's up to them what their choice is. But if we just assume that they're not going to be interested, we're not ever going to have places like this.
And I think this program, hopefully, and thanks to Calvin having done this since the early 1980s, will open a lot of doors and show this to perhaps tens of thousands of people in this multi-county region we call northeastern New York. And maybe, just maybe, they'll say, come on, Maude, we're going to the House of History.
Well, let me take you into William Wheeler's bedroom.
Why don't you step over the cord and we'll get our little caravan headed inside here. Oh, look at this. Oh, my goodness. This is neat. Look at the bed. Look at the clock and the desk. Where do we begin?
Well, it's called William Wheeler's bedroom because a lot of the furniture is his. This bedroom is the only bedroom downstairs that is heated, or that was heated even in those times. So you have a coal fireplace behind
Look at
here,
this. Oh,
and the other side of the fireplace is in the library, which would have been Dad's library, and that would be heated with wood. A boot jack.
Boot jack.
The boot jack is in the shape of a cricket because it's lucky to have a cricket on the hearth.
Oh, of course, cricket on the hearth.
Yeah.
Famous. Oh, absolutely beautiful. And that's his.
That's William Wheeler.
photograph.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about William Wheeler.
William Wheeler was a vice president during Rutherford B. Hayes, and his actual home is now the present is the Elks Club. All right.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes.
Oh.
And he was when he was growing up, due to ill health, he couldn't really go as far in education as he wanted to. So after he grew up and became prosperous, he helped other people, other boys and girls who didn't have the finances to get them anywhere.
Oh.
This is called the Star Quilt.
Yep. Quilting, that was almost a whole way of life back then,
This
too.
is how I would have curled my hair back then.
Of
I
course.
put that right inside and get it heated in the lamp. Then, of course, you have all that soot on your hair, too.
Of course. And look at that beautiful tiny boots. Oh.
And here's the little hook that you would need, the
Button
button
hook.
hook to close the shoes on the children. This, I think, is neat, being a woman.
Oh, yes,
This
we do have for hairpins.
This isn't for hairpins.
No.
This is when you brush your hair and whatever pieces of hair fall
That's
out,
where
you put it in here.
Oh,
And then when you
okay.
want to make yourself a really important hairdo, you put these old pieces, you make it into a knob or whatever,
Oh, there
and
you
then
go.
just smooth your hair over the top. So the children think that's just gross.
Oh, my,
So-
that's beautiful.
I should have started that years ago.
Both of us should have. Maybe between us, we could have had a head of hair. Just absolutely beautiful. Beautiful objects. And look at the
This
hat
is
box.
the hat box for the man's beaver hat, which is in here.
Oh, look at this, Calvin. is
Worn to
that-
his inauguration, when there was the inauguration of Hayes.
Nope.
No,
Very small head. Rutherford had a small head. Oh, that's great. That's absolutely beautiful.
And this is William Wheeler's wife's shawl that she wore to the inauguration.
Is it really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I see a photograph of the house.
Mm-hmm. Way back then.
That was taken way back when. I gotta get my old eyes closer, and
I don't know.
I'm guessing that would probably have been taken maybe in the 1870s or 80s by the looks of it. But it's nice to see that it has been restored to what it was originally. This porch was something that was here, and we understand it was torn down a short
Right.
time ago.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Oh my goodness. I feel right at home. I don't know about you, but I feel right at home here. This is really neat. We're going to pause for just a moment in our trip through the House of History in Malone to put a new battery in our machine and get a fresh start. Take a deep breath and we'll continue our tour.
Okay.
The House of History has a genealogy room, and you talked about a groundswell of interest in history. All of a sudden, people who have no idea who their great-grandfather was are being enticed by their neighbors who are doing it, or by all these ads that pop up on their computers saying, "We'll help you find your roots." So they're coming back, aren't they? Huh?
They are indeed, and we're seeing a swell in interest. We get people in here every afternoon during the summer working at various resources that we have. I'd like to take you through some of the resources.
I wish
in
you
this
would,
room.
Ted. Thank you.
We call this room the Kilburn Library, in honor, of course, of Congressman Kilburn. And we have in the computer over by the window a file of material that is represented around the room. So usually our first stop is to go to that file and see where a family surname is located in this room. And once we have that, then usually the next step is to go over here to these drawers. These are the surname files in here. Each name, for example, here's Daggett and Pease. Here's another one called Dallenbach. There are files for each family name in the county. Now that's not quite true because some family names haven't gotten in there yet. But we're gradually increasing our coverage of family names in Franklin County. Now, in addition to the surname files, where you find lots of stuff, and by the way, the stuff that's in the surname files is largely contributed by people in those families. Someone sent me, knowing that my name is Mills, someone sent me genealogy of Mills family, the Mills family in this area. It came through John Mills here in this town. And it happens that my Mills family is from Ohio, not from northern New York, so I couldn't use that information, but what we did was put it in the Mills folder in this surname file. So a lot of the material here in these folders comes from the families in the area. Now, in addition, we have obituary files. We have volunteers who read the papers and pull obituaries out, paste them on cards, label them.
Historians do,
and
you
file
know.
them. Oh, I'll tell you, it takes a lot of work to
Oh,
do
it sure
this,
does.
and we've got volunteers doing it all the time, both the people you see here, like Bonnie, and other people who just work at home, clipping newspapers and pasting cards. There are old marriage files and records and baptism records in these little drawers here. And across the way, there is a large old library
Boy,
card
is that
catalog.
familiar. Have I pulled a few of those drawers in my
As a
day?
matter of fact, from when you were a kid, I'm sure. That has in it cemetery records, which were painstakingly gathered by local people, some from Chateauguay, others from other parts of the county. The cemetery records for the county are duplicated. That is, what's in there is largely in a set of notebooks over yonder, so we can consult either way. And of course, there are cemetery records that people like Clyde Rebedew and the McClellans before him have done for Clinton County and other parts of the North Country.
We chuckle when we say that because Calvin and I have spent a great deal of time at his dining room table.
There you are.
We've known Clyde for years. We knew him when he worked for the United States government. And since he's retired, he has to say he's been prolific in his writing and his research is incredible. He loves numbers, and he loves to travel all over the country and trace his own heritage down, and to prove, as he says he did with his Beaver Tales book that we just talked about a few weeks ago, that his Robidoux family was very instrumental in the settling of the American West. So he's a very colorful guy to talk to, spends his winters down in Hawaii and the rest of the time in the North Country, and he has written how many books, Calvin? 23? How about 23 books of one kind or another over the years?
Well, he's very generous with his information, too. I met him in Addie Shields' office, the county historian.
Now, there's an experience you'll never forget.
That's right. And
he's wonderful.
That's a great place. The name Robidoux brings a different connection here, however. There was a Robidoux photographer here in town for many, many years, decades, and he built a huge collection of old pictures and negatives, most of which were labeled, that is, properly cataloged. And after his death, when the operation closed, and after some family members took photographs that were relevant to their interests, the rest were donated to the House of History. And we're now in the process. Mike Leonard and a couple other people are working to sort, catalog, label, and make available the Robidoux collection. So that's a big collection of photographic materials here, some of which are currently available and all of which will be eventually.
That's kind of neat to have that kind of a resource, isn't it?
Yeah, we just have an enormous collection of pictures, and one of our projects is to make those things properly accessible for people. Also in this room, you see the shelves. We have a fairly decent collection of materials, both local and Franklin County history, and also such things as the War of the Rebellion and other, Revolutionary War times. There are special categories. Dutch Schultz, the trial of the racketeer, was a big deal here. And,
yes.
kept the papers alive for a long time.
Oh, yes.
We have a collection of scrapbooks over on the side behind the door here. These are old books into which people pasted clippings years ago, and a lot of those clippings have things like announcements of marriages, births, deaths, and other events. So those we're gradually indexing. Some of them are indexed now, others are still in the process.
And amazingly, in spite of all the years people have been collecting things and pasting them in books, that great art of scrapbook making is also enjoying a tremendous resurgence. And you can go in any stationery store or a scrapbook store which sells anything you could ever want for starting your own scrapbook.
That's
so the
right.
more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yes, although the change is very real, because nowadays we realize how seriously some of the old storage materials deteriorated the historic material. And so we've been gradually moving into the use of acid-free archival quality materials, but that's expensive. Those things are very expensive, and so we've had to allocate more and more funds just for the materials to make the storage suitable for long-term preservation.
Yeah, that's a very important point. Some of these old documents and things you require may not be in wonderful shape by the time you get them.
That's right. Now, if you were to come in here between 1 and 4 p.m. any afternoon except Monday, you would find a scene that looks a little bit like this. Here's someone who is using the card catalog, the cemetery. This is Peggy Ralston working on the Blair family of Chateauguay. Peggy also happens to be our president, and she's sneaking a little time here to do some genealogical work.
We're pleased to meet you, Peggy. The Blair family has been in residence here, not only in this county, but in other North Country families for a long, long time. I work with a gal, I work as a crime victims advocate in the Clinton County Probation Department, and the gal I work with, my partner's maiden name is Blair, and they're from the Burnt Hill area of Saranac, west of Plattsburgh. So the Blairs, and that's a big family. So the Blairs have, they got a foothold here.
They certainly do. My family came in through Canada. They lived in Canada for about 10 years, I believed. They came over from Ireland. And then they moved to the Malone and Chateauguay area. Some were involved working at the lumber companies and the pulp mill company in Chateauguay. So,
I love your notes.
oh,
Because I take notes about everything in the world. I told Ted we just spent 9 days in Scotland, and it's the first time I've ever gone on vacation and taken notes, but I kept a journal because I write a newspaper column, and I knew for sure I would forget the names of these beautiful places and things we saw. And boy, was I delighted at the notes. What do you got over there?
This is a picture of Congressman Kilburn.
Oh my goodness, yes.
He's sitting at this desk, this double desk where Peggy is sitting, in his office in the House of Representatives in Washington.
Isn't that
So-
neat? And this is the desk?
This is the desk from Congressman Kilburn's office, and it's one of the reasons we call this the Kilburn
Can
Library.
you feel the energy coming on? Do you put your hands right down on the desk every once in a while? So I'd like to get a little background about everybody. Peg, how did you get connected with this wonderful organization?
well, I had grown up in Chateauguay, and then after
Oh,
college,
right. I was in Chateauguay this morning on the Jones Road.
and after college, I moved away and came back in retirement.
See what it does?
And,
It's a magnetism here, magical magnetism that draws people back.
So I wanted to know more about my family and my roots, and I came out here and was just amazed of all the information that was available to me.
And they said, guess what? You're going to be president.
Well, they said they needed volunteers, and so I thought this was something I would really like to do.
Isn't it great?
So I've been here for about 10 years.
Have you really?
Yes.
It's so enjoyable to come into a place like this and meet people who have this wonderful interest and enthusiasm for history, and to bring it right to the forefront.
Yes.
Is that a picture of the? Do you know what that's a picture of, Ted? Huh? Let's go make this back here. Let's.
I think you've already guessed. Why don't you tell me? I'm going to interview you now. Tell me about this picture, Gordon.
Isn't that the Lost Dolphin?
Yes, it is.
Home in near Hogansburg. A great, charming part of my childhood history is my father was one of those circuit rider preachers, ministers in my youth, and we spent a lot of time down there growing up with the people who lived there. And a good friend of ours, whose name is Wayne Miller, did his master's thesis on the history of the Mohawks in this area. And so we talked about this, and as a small child, the mystery surrounding this home and the dolphin himself, an incredible part of my growing up. So when I saw that picture, I said, yep, I know what that is.
Well, Wayne Miller's one of our good friends, too. He's been very helpful to us as librarian of the special collection in Feinberg Library.
We attach ourselves like leeches to Wayne Miller, and every time, when you write a newspaper column, people just throw out little tidbits on your desk and say, why don't you do the history of?
Yeah.
And of course, I know nothing, so I call back, or he'll do the same with me. Mm-hmm. Wayne will say, Gordy, you got to do something. So in one of my columns, I started out by saying, Wayne Miller is a troublemaker. He caused me so much grief. And so every time he sees me, he said, I want to thank you, Gordy, from the bottom of my heart. Every time I walk into my home at night, my little kids run up and say, the troublemaker's home. He is a good guy. And I have to tell you that his dad and mother were good friends of ours. And when we first interviewed him some years back, he walked up and said, my mother says hello. I said, I know your mother? Well, you ought to. Your father baptized me. His father ran a potato chip factory in Brushton, was also, I think, a school teacher for many years, and you learn a lot of things around a campfire. And I learned around the campfire last night that he taught one of the people that we're camping with when she was a youngster going to Malone School. So you see?
Yeah.
Everything is connected if you can get down there deep enough.
I can
right?
tell your walking history. That chair right behind you there is something that we rescued at the time that the legislature was being renovated. The legislative chambers were being renovated, and so we acquired that chair. One of my life ambitions now has been to have a chair like that, so I can sit in the chair and tickle the lion's tonsils with my index finger whenever I want to.
Isn't that
I just think it's
amazing?
a
Can I do it too?
marvelous
My fat fingers have great trouble getting in the lion's mouth. That's a wonderful chair.
There you go.
Isn't that
And
great?
not a lion exactly, but a Harrison. Richard Harrison is on the wall over there. He was proprietor of this part of northern Franklin County. At the time that it was settled, at the beginning of the 19th century, Harrison was a New York attorney and a very knowledgeable man, something of a scholar, in fact. And he became part, although he was not himself an Irishman, he became part of a group of Irishmen in New York City who became proprietors of this entire Franklin County area and gave Irish names to the area. There was a township that was called Tipperary, and of course there's Moira, and just wonderful, Burke, wonderful names in this area that came from Harrison's group of friends in New York City when they acquired this property up here. So we keep a picture of him around. Being that we're in Malone right now and it's bicentennial, the little picture down to the right of Harrison's big picture is of Edmund Malone, for whom this town was named.
Oh.
So there are a lot of stories about Edmund Malone, which I won't take your time to tell you now, but they're published in a variety
It's
of
a
contexts.
Malone has had so many famous people who've either passed through here or lived here and did business here, not the least of which was a man by the name of Orville Gibson, who was synonymous with the Gibson Guitar Company, and I bet you know all about his old homestead outside Chateauguay. And we have a good friend who runs a music oasis right near Chateauguay, and he took us around to that homestead, and it was a delightful experience for most of us. Unfortunately for him, it wasn't, because I slammed his hand in the door getting out of the car, so he may never play guitar quite the same again. But people to realize that Orville Gibson was born and brought up here, then traveled to Kalamazoo and started his wonderful company, which is still a world presence in the guitar mandolin business, and then came back to spend his latter years right here and died in Malone.
And the Gibson brothers are from
And the
Chateauguay.
Gibson brothers.
They're
That's another class of Gibsons altogether, but they're wonderful, aren't they?
Is that a different family?
Well, they claim to be related somewhere, but they haven't quite determined yet. I think we're going to
Send them over here,
send
yeah.
them right here
Send
to
them
the
over here,
genealogy.
We'll figure that out.
But they are charming and wonderful people.
Yes.
And I just did history of an old hermit who lived near them in the border, and they wrote a song about this old hermit. And so they are good people, and they're extremely talented musicians.
Okay, well, this is our genealogical collection, and we have lots of folks who enjoy it.
How this is something we should mention for all the people who are watching this program. How would they make contact with your organization? Should they call? Should they stop in? Let's say they want another check for $15,000 or $20,000 there.
Calling is a good idea before you come, but it's not necessary. Our hours are 1 to 4 p.m. Tuesday through Saturday, and it's rare that you don't find anyone here at that time, very rare, at least between Memorial Day and Labor Day. In the fall, we're open on Saturday afternoons. A call is always possible. I'm embarrassed to say the telephone number isn't in my head. Do you know it, Peggy?
Yes, I do.
Oh, okay, let's get over here.
Our number is 483-2750.
Okay, this is in the 518 calling area, isn't
Yes,
it?
yes it is, and we have an answering machine, so you can leave your questions on the machine, and we'll get back to you.
Before we travel around and continue our tour of this great house of history. We want to thank you for your contribution.
You're welcome, and thank you for coming.
What would the world be without people like all of you deciding to spend a few years, a few hours helping out to preserve the history? See who's waiting in the hallway, holding on to the newel post.
I think she just slid down the banister.
You
but
think
I'm
I
not
didn't
sure.
know what the newel post was?
I'm sure you did.
I've
And
slid
if you
down.
think I'm going to tell you if I did slide or not, I'm not.
I can tell you without equivocation that I have slid down a few of those banisters in my lifetime. Sometimes disastrous results on the end, depending how
Oh, it's very
colorful
soft.
the filial is
Yes.
on the end, but yes,
You've never slid down a banister, Gordy. You slid down the railing.
the
The
railing.
banister is the stick.
Oh,
Oh,
okay, well, you know, I got to tell you a story, though. See, you're supposed to be telling me the stories, but I can tell you a little one. My mother, my wife, and her mother were both born in the same house, which was a place called Gale Meadows, which is now Camp Jericho, a YMCA day camp. That's not too far from Plattsburgh, 10 or 12 miles away. And they just tore down the old house that they were both born in, and somebody was kind enough to preserve a couple of the banisters and gave them to us, and now I have to figure out a way to display them somehow in my house. But what a nice piece of history to have a piece of the house you were born in before
Yeah.
they ripped it
Right,
down.
right.
So what's next, young lady?
Well, if we want to go up the staircase here, then we can show you some of the, used to be bedrooms, but now are special rooms.
Okay, we're coming.
And these are just acquaintances or friends of the family.
Oh, isn't it great to have
In other words,
pictures?
they don't know who they are.
That's right. those are the birds.
Oh, boy. But that was customary to put pictures along the way. Oh, gosh. What a great home. Look at this. Look at this. Isn't that charming?
Now, this would have been the way the girls in those days had these kind of dolls, but with the porcelain faces, hands, and feet, they didn't really play with them the way our girls play with them now. In other words, these didn't really go outside very much unless they were in a little carriage. They weren't carried under their arm. They weren't changed, bathed, and all of that stuff. Matter of fact, in those days, if the little girl's doll turned out to be dusty-looking or rumpled, then it reflected on the little girl, who, of course, reflected on the mom.
Oh, okay.
So that's the beginning of, how to behave.
Oh, golly.
Now, you looked at all the fretwork downstairs.
Oh,
Look at
look
this
at
chair.
this.
This was Lucy Gilbert's chair. I have to say, I don't really know, any too much about her, except that she was the beginning of the SPCA, but she not as a actual group, but she had all kinds of whatever animals were left over. She kept at her house.
Isn't that amazing? 1955, the year I graduated from high school, from Moira High School.
Now, this is the spinning room. It would have been a bedroom way back then, but right now with the fourth graders, when they come, they learn about flax. They learn how to spin the flax into thread, and then later on we go across the hall and they learn how to weave that into whatever they needed.
Boy, it's talking about ancient things. Wow. I'm just looking around. My eyes are trying to take it all in here. This is just unbelievable. Two-size spinning wheels.
Well, one is for flax and one is for wool, for whatever reason. I don't know.
Lots of carders.
Carders, yeah.
Oh, my. And pieces of textiles on the wall, woven textiles. Okay, there's a word I never saw before. Scutching?
I have.
Processing of scutching. No, I'm sorry,
Of
I never
flax.
heard of that.
I don't
Wow.
know. No, couldn't tell you. When you do flax, you have to soak the flax and then you put it in between here and beat it so that the fibers will come away from the stalk.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And a lot of the children, when they come, they can't decide that what you have on the top there can turn into a handkerchief or
Yeah.
a placemat or whatever and be smooth and everything. Because, of course, the first thing they do is, touch
Yeah.
it, and it's picky.
Oh, my. Oh, there's a bicentennial quilt. I
yes.
should have known that there would have to be one.
And
All right,
after,
let me get over here next to you.
After the fourth graders have been here, a lot of them have gone back to their classes and made a quilt for one, one theme or another.
Oh, the farmer boys down in the corner, those are beautiful. Now, was that made this year, just this year?
No,
Oh.
that's been there for a couple of years already.
Oh,
Here are all the people who, donated to it, made a square.
I see, okay. It's a fluting iron. Oh my goodness. Isn't this just, I love the
Fluting is what you do to make the pleats, so then you can later sew it the way you need it.
I see, okay. Oh, this is a great, I bet the kids love this
And
room, don't
notice
they,
there's
huh?
Now we have the register, but before, this would have been a bedroom with no heat.
Uh-huh. Well, a lot of upstairs bedrooms had no heat even when I was a child, that's for sure. Okay.
This is called the broom making room,
Oh,
where somebody will show the children how to get it from that, and going through this process to have it turn into that. And sometimes when they're here, they get to make themselves those little whisk brooms for your clothes.
A little whistle,
Mhm.
huh? Oh, those are so neat.
And then here's a diorama of the Hogansburg area, so you just move up.
Okay. Oh, look at this. Who made this, I wonder?
I really don't know. That, once again, that's been here a long time before I
Somebody
started
better
to.
find out who made this. This is really neat, isn't it?
They really put some time and effort and planning into it. And I like the way that they chose the wallpaper to go with it.
No. Isn't that unbelievable? Yeah, this is beautifully made, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
With the birch bark canoes and the long houses and,
Get right into Unshoyoda, huh?
yeah. I bet you they would know, too. Oh, that's beautiful. Okay.
And then this just shows them the sort of the process to get from seeds and corn down through all the things that they would use to get to finally end up with a broom.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Broom corn.
Yeah, broom corn.
That's right.
Harvesting the broom corn.
And then this is just an example of the old kinds of cameras, one that would show the children why they ended up with all those people having such sour expressions, because this did not allow them to smile. They couldn't hold a smile, and the photograph would be blurry.
Oh, isn't that amazing? Look at this. Oh, my. The train man, the car CNR conductor,
Mm-hmm.
Rutland Railway, a couple of spikes. Great pieces of North Country history, huh? That's neat. This is now, it's called the Broom Room, huh?
Yes, the broom room.
All right.
And now across here is the pioneer room. Or did you want to stop? And
Well, I want to stop.
some
Look at
things?
this wonderful old
There's
map.
a light here.
Let me
I don't
pull
know if
this
you
light
know.
on and that'll help a little better. Did that add glare, Calvin? But that's a great old map.
Mm-hmm. And the person that was here the other day, he said in the older times was everything just a square piece of land.
Yeah, isn't that
Well,
amazing?
yeah.
They did block them off, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Some areas they call the patents, right?
Mhm.
There's Belmont. There's
That's-
Belmont.
That's
there.
right. Yeah.
Bangor, Brush's Mills. That's what Brushton was called.
Was it really?
Originally
I didn't
was
know
Brush's Mills originally. And there's Moira. I was so glad that Ted, even though he spent most of his life away from here, came back and learned how to say Moira.
Yeah.
Because in our area, down in Essex County, there is a Mariah.
Yes, there is.
When I tell people I lived in Moira, they are so confused.
I'm sure. It was my sister taught in Mariah.
Did she really?
Yes.
Well, I've been trying to track down some of my old teachers from Moira High School, not just to say hello, but to apologize for being a very rotten kid when I was in high school. All right, that's great. I love that map. Alvin and I, Addie Shields has some wonderful old maps in her office, Clinton County Historian's office too, and we talk about the maps and the railroads and when they came in and what an impact they had in the growth of each area. And I know the railroad was a very important part of the growth of Franklin County. What else?
Well, he's going to look at those.
Oh, of
Or
course
do you
he
want?
is.
This is, doesn't have anything to do with the Franklin House history, but this is the covered bridge that Almanzo Wilder's mom and dad sort of courted through. Because his father lived in Burke and his mother had lived in Chateauguay.
Oh, that's great. Picture of a stagecoach. You just have little juicy tidbits all over the place here. All right, this side.
Right.
What do we got here?
I can't tell you much about that.
Ted?
That'll jump
No,
in.
he's shaking his head.
No.
Well, great old photographs anyway. I just want to look at some of these things.
Paul Smith and the
Oh, Paul Smith. Yeah, we've seen that picture before, that's for sure. Oh, the part of the sanatorium. The Little Red. That little cottage still exists, I'm quite sure, up there.
It's in that book downstairs.
And
So is mine.
McCullum's. We just have to scan everything, you know. You're not going to let us get out of here without looking at all these things. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. It's reminiscent of a place we stopped on the Isle of Skye off Scotland, where we finally saw some of the old cottages with the thatched roofs that not very many exist anymore, but they had a little museum inside and it was absolutely charming. Oh boy, here we go.
Here's the Pioneer Room.
The Pioneer Room.
And this is various implements that the pioneers, around that time, which perhaps weren't called pioneers then, but this is some of the things that they would have used, had around definitely.
Oh boy, and how many of our viewers can actually identify what some of these things are here, from yokes to grain shovels to lanterns to corn planters.
To the kettle that would hang on the crane in their fireplace.
Oh, isn't that beautiful? Look at the ancient axe with the modern handle.
And this is a spider. I never knew what a spider was.
Spiders, of course.
Spider's
we
a frying
call-
pan that's on legs.
Yeah, and we called them spiders. Even after they removed
Yes,
the legs, we
right.
still called them
That's why I
spiders.
was confused at
Our
home.
parents called them spiders. And skillets and frying pans and,
Right.
oh boy, we got a great old square and horseshoes. So that one particularly designed to scrape your boots off, I betcha. Huh? That one right there, you think?
Maybe.
I think so. That would have been mounted in such a way that you could rub your boot over it. I would guess. I don't know. I may be wrong. Isn't this a beautiful look at this?
This is my favorite tool in the whole place. It's a primitive pitchfork, of course, but primitive has different meanings. It took more than primitive skill to make this tool out of a single piece of wood.
Isn't that amazing?
If you look at it, the piece has been bent and it has been split twice. So the three tines of the fork come up like this, and then little supports have been placed between the three tines. And later on, a metal piece was driven through here for more support. But you just think what it took to make that kind of tool. That's hardly a primitive skill, even though it looks like a primitive tool. And that describes a lot of the way the early families were in Franklin County. They were primitive in one sense, but very skilled and ingenious
In so many
in many
ways.
ways.
That's a good point to make to youngsters and to their parents in these days. They had so much to do in the course of a day. We have so much time for leisure compared to these folks, and they had to make or buy the best tool they could for the job. Would that be a grain shovel?
That's a grain shovel, and it's one piece of wood.
Isn't it beautiful?
That's really impressive, I think.
Absolutely beautiful, and the fact that it survives and sits here today is even better. Oh my goodness! And these are water lines, right?
Yes, indeed.
Wooden water lines.
Mm-hmm. You can see through them. Calvin, can you see me? I see you.
Isn't that cool?
Terrific.
I love it. Sure, why not?
early in the history of Malone in particular, there was a man named Parmalee, Ashbel Parmalee, who was a very influential minister for over 30 years in the Congregational Church. Ashbel Parmalee's favorite sermon preparation method was to sit in this old rocker with a big writing surface, bigger than you see in schoolrooms these days. This was his old rocker, and just in case he ran out of pencils or pens,
look.
he had a whole supply
Yes.
stashed right there by his knee. Okay, so these are just neat little pieces that go
That's
with
actually a rocker, too.
history of it. Yes, it's a rocking chair. It's a little rough now. I think it may have warped a little over the years.
This is also a writing chair.
Yes.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Great memories. And look at this high chair.
Oh, it's a stroller.
A stroller, high chair stroller.
Yes, yes, yes. This handle is back here. I'm not going to set it up now because I don't know enough. You, Bonnie?
I don't know that. I can undo it, but I
Okay. Well, we discourage school children from doing
Oh,
this
look
when
at
they come
this.
in.
Look at this.
Yeah.
but I
Neat
don't
old
know how
stroller,
to
huh?
make it go back up, so I just let it out a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Isn't that great with iron wheels?
I can imagine kids coming in here thinking that that big handle there on the side was to put your dinner on while you're watching TV.
Oh, sure. Can you imagine that? Look at, there's so many things inside here. Aspirin stops pain, brings comfort. Oh, look at this.
Aspirin is both modern and old.
Yeah, it certainly is.
Well, you can see this is my favorite room.
Oh,
I love the old tools in here. The harness making tools. This is a harness maker's bench. You know, the harness is put in here, and you have a foot pedal for gripping it.
Yep.
So your hands are free. And
Oh, my.
there are many shoe making tools here.
Look at the different size lasts. Look at this for some child who
Yes, there was a
maybe
child.
had the polio or something.
Whatever it was, I don't know, but yes, it was a child with crippled legs, and that was
my.
built for her.
The old boots and no, I can understand why this would be your favorite room.
Oh, yeah.
I love old tools. Look at miniature sleigh over there and
Yes, someone built
boots
that as
with
well.
a spur. And this is what building is that?
Looks like it's part of the True Stitch factory. Yes, I think it's the True Stitch factory, a slipper factory that operated for many years and was bought was bought by Wolverine in Michigan a few years ago, and just in the past year or two, not only the factory but the outlet store were closed down, so we don't have it anymore. But True Stitch gave us a fair amount of material of historic value, material showing the construction of shoes, old photographs, a small amount of equipment. And all of that will eventually be part of an exhibit. It's not out yet.
You've just done everything so tastefully here. We're
Oh,
just in love with this home. I
glad
just
you
may have to bring people here by droves.
I'm glad you like it. There's one room I think you haven't seen.
All right.
It's also a bedroom converted to an exhibit room. We keep looms in here of various types.
Oh, look at the
And-
clock. Oh, my goodness.
Yes, that's a great old clock.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I got to just look at it to see what it says on it. Standard Electric Time Company, Springfield, Mass. We just saw a clock in the Messina Museum that was made by the same company. We had a clock company in Plattsburgh for quite a few years, the Baird Clock Company. Manufacturing is a big part of Franklin County history, and there have been quite a few things made here down through
Woolen
the
mills in particular.
Yeah.
Of course, there are a different type of loom that are used, but we had a lot of woolen mill activity here for many years. In fact, the old Ballard mill is still in use,
sure.
but not to make wool. It's now an arts center. But children, when they come here, Bonnie may have told you that fourth graders come in here. And one of the things they can choose as a project is weaving. They can also choose spinning or broom making or cookie making or candle dipping. So the kids remember those visits very well.
Oh, of course they do. For years and years and years. That's a wonderful loom.
Yeah.
A tiny sewing machine.
Yes,
Boy,
indeed.
Is that so old?
Yes, that's a very old one there.
Very.
The one over on the other side of the room is a more recent, more elegant and more recent model. But
Over here, yeah.
yeah.
We saw an old cylinder record player yesterday in the other museum in Messina with a very similar top on it. So I don't. They may have been made by that, but this is. People think of Singer when they think of sewing machines, but White is another very famous name in sewing machine history. Boy, is that one beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, my.
Yes, it is.
What another great room, and an ancient violin. Wouldn't you love to know?
The violin was made in Ruston, I believe. It's a local,
Really?
It's a local product, yes.
Oh, no kidding.
This museum tours are not my specialty, so sometimes I have to cheat and look at the notes.
Cheating is good.
This is the Miller violin.
Hey, I wonder if
John Jack Miller violin, made approximately 1865.
maybe it's Wayne's ancestors.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
Anyway, it was made locally.
Yeah.
We have another one downstairs that is the Bruston violin that is damaged and needs to be repaired before we can exhibit it. You know, that's one of the things in a place like this. There are so many possibilities for showing periods and themes and emphases in Franklin County history that you just can't do them all. So we try and allocate our volunteers and our funds to maximize
Look
that.
at this clever walking stick. Isn't that amazing? Just kind of propped against the side of the wall. So we've seen most of the house now.
Yes, I'm going to take you now back into the servants' quarters.
Okay.
The servants' quarters we use as a working area now.
Oh, this is just so great.
The president's office is here and would be the director's office when we have one. And there's a workshop, we call it the accession room because that's where the collection, the new materials land first. And then, when the servants needed to go from upstairs to
Are you ready?
downstairs,
Are you ready for this,
they
Calvin?
came through here.
All right.
Come on, camera, you can't get...
I'm going to walk slow in case he falls on me. I want to get this groan on
Yes, all right.
television. Just be careful, Calvin. Isn't this great?
Let me tell you, we don't encourage the kids to use this stairway, but they love it.
This is absolutely terrific. And the camera, you're doing very well. Very good. He's taking a picture of every step and then a picture of what the steps look like coming down.
You can see that the upstairs servants were all skinny.
Yeah, I would have to say I did have to walk a little sideways coming down there.
And this is the kitchen. Now, you haven't been in this room with the camera before.
Nope.
Okay. The kitchen is a pioneer kitchen. We had the old stove reconditioned, and it meets fire code and everything.
No kidding.
It is usable as we have a supply of wood in the basement. We can build fires here and cook or whatever. There's a marvelous old waffle iron here.
You think that doesn't bring back childhood memories for me?
One of the things I would love to do is make waffles on that.
Oh gosh.
And we have an iron caddy here where there's a set of them, and you see you can keep the irons hot, and as one begins to cool, you don't have to wait. You can rush right to another one, and it'll be hot. And here's the water reservoir over here. You had, of course, the need to humidify the place, so the water reservoir does that. And the warming oven up over.
Also provided hot water for use.
Oh, sure.
Yes, and hot water to use that too, right?
Absolutely true.
A good point.
Beautiful.
Okay, so this is a favorite spot and you see the muffin pans hanging behind and whatever. The kids enjoy that, and they always ask, how long have those apple rings been hanging there drying? And we say since 1810, I believe.
That's great to have a stove and a working stove.
It is a working
And
stove.
I'm not sure if that's an ash bucket or what would this be in the back here?
I think that's probably a milk container, but
You think
let's see
so?
what it says. Oh, it says donation.
Oh, that's even better.
Yes, well,
Snoopy people get the donate.
Yeah, get the donate, yeah.
and you notice the little bench over here that's specially for sleeping children.
Oh, isn't
With
that? Never saw anything like that in my life
With a little
before.
railing on it.
It's a rocking
It's
bench.
a removable railing, but we leave it in, of course. But it's a rocker, and you can put your baby here and sit there, and the child sleeps, and it's a mother's rocking bench.
What won't they think of next?
Yeah. I love it. Really beautiful.
The old sink with its
The old dry sink.
frame from before in the water, the pump, of course, is straight from the well.
Or would
but-
have been connected to a cistern in the basement in those days, possibly as well.
Very likely, yes. I can't tell you what the fact was here, whether it was cistern or well. In my house, the old log house I live in, there was a sink similar to this, but with a zinc liner.
Oh, with a zinc liner, sure.
Yeah, and a hand pump like this, and the hand pump drew water up from the brook. So there was a line that ran, 50 feet back to the brook. So there are many water sources.
Oh my, just so many neat things here.
An early washboard. Bonnie had to leave, or she would have told you all about these. She knows more about this than I. But the early washboard is not made of metal like the ones that you remember
No,
from your
made out of
childhood.
wood.
This is knurled wood in which the pieces are actually machined, and fitted together. And it's I've never seen one like this until I came here.
Nor have I. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
It's quite a piece. Oh, but I want to show you our country store. Okay.
Okay, we got to do that.
We have a country store back here where you can buy all manner of things that are either modern or old. Actually, most of what we have is modern. for sale, I mean.
But
is-
beautiful.
is modern. Yes, yes. And there are a lot of things on exhibit, which of course are not for sale, but tools and old lanterns and even the old cash register is, it's functional, but it's not for sale.
Old skis and snowshoes
Yep.
and
Yeah. We keep a selection of books here. The one I mentioned to you earlier that Robert McGowan did on architecture in the Adirondack foothills is this one, and it contains a lot of marvelous pictures from all around Franklin County.
oh, isn't that's a gem, isn't it?
Yes, it really is. And the little account I mentioned at the beginning of how the structure of this house reflects the social structure of the time,
sure.
that's McGowan's account. I stole it from him.
I love it.
The book we published this year is called North Country Settlers. It's got quite a bit of information about Malone because it was published for the Malone bicentennial. And then in the back, it has 14 papers from people, written by people who were either themselves early settlers, written in the 1880s, or were the children or grandchildren of early settlers, written in the 1920s. So there's a considerable collection of original source material in this book, as well as historical chapters about the settling and the history of Malone in the 19th century.
Explain this how these pictures are put together and what they represent.
Well, we took 3 pictures. One was the Horton Mill, which forms a backdrop. The Horton Mill is one of the oldest structures in the county.
Still exists.
Yes, it still exists. As a matter of fact, its roof is in bad shape right now, and we have a group along the Salmon River who are working at restoring the Horton Mill because the general structure of the building is quite durable. So the Horton Mill comes from, I believe, 1859 or so, although Horton himself built a mill on the site before 1810. So that represents a kind of the earliest history, and the mill history, the way the river was essential, particularly the falls of the river were essential to the life of the early settlers. Then down here is the railroad. The railroad was the thing that really changed Malone's life in 1850. And this locomotive is a wood burner. You can actually see in the back piles of wood where the firemen would stoke the fire with wood rather than coal. This old wood burner was built in 1849 and used on the Rutland Railroad that came through here in 1850. So it's a kind of a charming old gem.
And that's your family log cabin.
And the one in the middle is my house. Now, the house where you can see the logs the logs are covered with cedar siding, so it doesn't look the same. Miss Thurber, Anna Thurber, is standing in front of it. Anna's father built the place in 1850. So we have, three different sides of Malone history here: the early mill, the log cabin, and the railroad that transformed the place, and a picture of the House of History on the back, no less.
And that book is available right here for people whose appetites have been whetted by this program.
Yes, I could turn into a hawker very quickly here and tell you that it costs $19.95 plus tax, and there's a hardback version available for $29.95. So, and we have it here, and the Malone Chamber of Commerce has it also.
Well, we certainly have taken the Cook's tour
Well, I'm glad.
and have enjoyed every moment that we spent here. And I hope that we have whetted some appetites, and so that people will take an interest in the history of Malone, celebrating its 200th anniversary this year, but in the history of whatever municipality, town, village, city, back road that they live on.
Yes, well, we're part of a network of historians and historical groups that runs all over the state, of course, all over the country. But our network is primarily a New York State network. It's very active, and the people at state level are very supportive.
Isn't it fun to meet other historians who have the same passions?
Yes, we get together and people think we're working, but actually it's like play.
We've interviewed Addie Shields many times, and
yeah.
this woman is such a wealth of information. We talked with Bonnie and others before about being able to stand in a place and feel the history.
Mm-hmm.
Addie's one of those people that can take you on a knoll and say, okay, we're standing here, and it's 1786. This would have been where the stream came, and she draws the picture, and you are transported back in time.
Yep,
It's beautiful.
and she's very good.
Oh, I think those are rug beaters up on the wall.
I think so.
I think
think
maybe
so.
I had to beat a few rugs with those in my distant.
We have a few rugs if you'd like to practice and upgrade your skills here.
I want Galvin to look at the old wiring up here, because many young people have never seen anything quite like this before.
Yes, we've been consulting with electrical folks, and one of the things we have been told is that although this is old wiring, as long as it is solid and secure, it is the safest form of wiring.
Isn't that amazing?
Because the hot and the ground lines are entirely separate, not mixed as they are in more recent forms of cable.
And they're see the old insulators and the way
Yes.
they're put together. It's just charming to see them again.
Yes, one of the good things that's happened to us this summer is that the local BOCES organization, with its instructor and its high school students, came and did a lot of electrical work here.
Oh, they did.
Our Vice President, Lynn Dufour, arranged that, and you get a lot of electrical upgrading to make this a safer house. It's something that we needed here. So.
Just as a very quick aside before we wrap it up here, I just came, as I said, from a tour of many parts of Scotland, the Highland, the Isle of Skye, and the Highlands, and they have all DC power over there in the UK. What a different experience that is, a whole
Yes.
different kind of power. And we just went our separate ways. Power in America was direct current until we decided that alternating current would be better. So it's way different. The plugs do not look the same when you try to plug in your shaver or your hair dryer, and
That's right. Well, once the alternating current was invented and became technologically feasible a century or so back, a century back, the folks where the biggest of the electrical installations existed, namely in Niagara, the Niagara area of New York, decided that because DC requires booster installations very frequently, so that to use DC over a long range is very expensive in terms of maintaining installations. AC would be better because you can send alternating current over long distances without boosting it. So it became economically more feasible for us because we have such a large country.
isn't that amazing? But people take trips to Europe and aren't aware that that's going to happen until they get there. Thank God for those little converters. You can
It's
get
a shock, and you can destroy a piece of equipment really
with
fast
no
by
problem
plugging.
at all. How well we know that from owning travel trailers over the years.
Oh,
Now,
I have to show you our one last thing before you go.
okay.
When you go out behind the servants' quarters, you go into the shed, and, well, it's kind of a clutter now, but I have to show you that this is our outhouse for the
Oh,
town.
this was the three-holer we before. This is
They have, the holes have been closed up, and the whole thing has been, sterilized. But this little room was
That was
the
it.
family's resource in time of need.
And in the old-fashioned hotels, they had multi-tiered structures
Yeah.
and different levels.
Mhm.
Unbelievable. Well, I'm so glad we made that one little last
Well, you've
tour.
seen the whole house now.
There's always one more door to open, and we thought the end-all, the be-all and end-all was the three-holer in the back of this
I
home.
actually had
But-
that in mind as the end of it. I forgot about this.
But anyway, we're in the carriage house, Ted, and this is delicious. Some of the items you have out here are delicious. For example,
Well, this is the sand wagon, and there's a little sign there, and I'm sure Calvin will catch the sign. Sand would be hauled in this wagon, and in the back there are logs. They're not movable now; they've been fixed. Here's one that's movable. You can actually pull the log out and part way, and the sand drops out.
Nice.
So this was an old dump truck, okay, for sand back in horse-drawn wagon days. The thing I love about it, however, is not the body and the logs, but I love these wheels. These wheels with marvelous heavy spokes and the big hubs and the steel rims. Oh, marvelous old wagon wheels. You just don't see things like you see little flimsy wagon wheels on somebody's barn wall or something as a show, but these are real working wheels.
massive wagon wheels. You imagine trying to change one of those when a spoke broke along
Yeah.
the road?
Well, you didn't have a flat tire. You didn't have to change it.
Those didn't break.
They didn't break that often, that's for sure.
That's right. Although, in the early roads in this area, the whole area, the early roads were just awful because when the people came into this area, they found solid forest everywhere. So to make a road, they had to clear. So they cut the trees. Now, you would think cutting the trees would make you a road. Oh, no. Because when you cut the trees, guess what you have left in the ground?
Oh, yeah.
The stump.
The stumps.
Well, let me tell you, when you cut the trees are useful. You can make lumber out of them or build houses or you can make potash or whatever. That's fine. So there's money in it. The guys didn't mind doing that. Taking a stump out of the ground, there's just no percentage in it. So it was hard to get anybody to take the stumps out of the public roadways. So the stumps would be there, and you could not bring a wheeled vehicle through the so-called roads because the stumps were so bad. And in addition, of course, you have all that glacial moraine, which they didn't have a name for in those days. They just knew that there were 7 million rocks in this doggone road. And so they had to get the stumps out, which meant hitching a team of oxen, because horses really couldn't handle roads like this. Their legs were too fragile. So they didn't use horses. They'd hitch a team of oxen to a stump, they'd pull a little, and they'd cut, and then they'd pull it a different way, and they'd cut some more, and eventually they'd get to the taproot, and they could cut that a little bit, and then those oxen, they would just pull that stump out. And you do that again, and again, and again, and again, and that was how you made a road. So those old roads were really awful. And not to toot my own book, but in fact there's a little account of how the roads actually got
Oh,
improved.
toot your own book.
For 1995.
And for
Well,
90 plus tax.
President Monroe, James Monroe, came here in 1817, and he came across from Plattsburgh to Ogdensburg. He was checking the road. This is shortly after the War of 1812, and he was checking the condition of roads and military use and all that stuff. And he got in here to Malone, and he'd been on this punishing road with wheels like this and stumps and stones, and he was sore and he was unhappy. Why are the roads this bad? And what he found in Malone is that they had just built a brand new stone bridge. And this was a state-of-the-art, as we would say now, stone bridge. And it was really quite elegant for the time. And the stone arch was still on its wooden supports when he came through. So he sent the team upstream with the carriage, and they forded upstream somewhere, and he walked across the stone bridge. And it was that experience in Malone. Then, of course, they gave him a big reception and everything. That was that experience in Malone that helped motivate his action when he went back, when he got back to Albany on his way home to Washington. He gave an order to the chief of military operations in Plattsburgh that they should finish that military turnpike, which had been approved several years earlier but not done. They should finish it, and he ordered the soldiers to work on that road.
That's how I got there today.
So that's how the road got done, and so
That's how he got here today, down the turnpike, right?
There you go.
And they really fixed it up recently, so he still got an influence, because that's a beautiful road now.
Well, I don't think that's Monroe anymore. But these wheels, they had to be ready to work on a road like that, and it was tough in those days.
We looked across here at this iron lung, and Calvin and I said, anybody who was brought up in the 50s, the 40s and the 50s knows what this is. Mm-hmm. And, it does evoke a certain emotion, and certainly in me, because I was a child in the 40s and early 50s. And yes, it did. I had a lot of friends who were involved.
Well, you can imagine when your breathing apparatus is destroyed by polio, living the rest of probably a short life in an apparatus like that. It does give you some feelings.
No idea how it came to the museum, but just seeing it was very special for me here today.
Yes.
One of the points we're making as we stand out here is that you're trying to figure out how to display these marvelous items for the public. Look at these lake boats here.
Yes.
Beautiful boats, a little
Great.
skiff and a couple of longer boats, defined by the number of major boards in their sides, right?
Yes, that's how it was done. That's right. This is a 4-boarder or some such number, I think 4. And that looks like a 7-boarder over there, which is a much more refined and better boat. These are fine old examples, and yes, you're right. It is a problem for us. At this point, we have less space than we need for even just for storage of materials, much less for exhibit of them in a suitable way. And the other problem then is how to finance additional space and additional preservation and exhibit time and space. So we're working on that. We haven't found the solution yet. Congressman Ortloff's $5,000 gift will help in that direction, but we're also replacing the roof and painting the woodwork.
We would like to redefine philanthropy today to include donations in excess of $1 million.
Yes, right.
But you're right, it's never done. No matter what resources you'd be handed today, there would always be something else that would help you fulfill your dreams here.
That's right.
And I'm glad you brought us out here. I've just you're giving me that overload here as I look around and see barrel hoops and so many things that are even difficult for me to define. Lacrosse, an integral part of North Country history. We're talking about Hogansburg and the reservation. I remember going to lacrosse games in the late 40s and 50s that were absolutely legendary. And then this can't be a popcorn popper up on.
Well,
you guessed
it does
it.
look like it.
The old-fashioned popcorn poppers looked a little bit like
No, you're right. I've used one of those as a kid, but I hadn't noticed that hanging there.
That's what it is.
that. Oh, Cal,
Got the
okay.
cover and everything.
There's a consensus.
Okay.
All right.
Well, we'll have a popcorn party someday with that then.
Oh, my, you have so many things jammed
Well,
in
it is
here.
a marvelous place.
What a great, look at the washing machine to your right over here. Oh, my.
That does not look like an electric washer. That
No,
looks
I do
like a
not.
hand-driven
I
washer.
think it absolutely
Yes.
was.
Or goat powered.
Yeah, goat powered. Speaking about goat powered, we actually have what would be an animal treadmill over here, I believe, right? Isn't that what that would be?
Yeah.
They use dogs. Dogs or goats or any other stock that you could keep on there for a while who would keep walking.
Yes, I don't know what it would have been driving, but yes, that looks like an animal treadmill, all right.
A charming old Adirondack twig chair, as they might call it. This is a part of Adirondack history. Making things out of twigs, and that is it says Adirondack twig chair, so I guess I was on the mark.
Right on the mark.
Isn't that amazing? And people who can work with twigs, including one of my sons who lives in Saranac Lake, are some of the most sought-after artisans in the world for these people who build modern mansions who want a little twig work in it. Oh, my goodness. You got it all here, just jammed in.
Any day that you want to have a good time, just come back and wander around this
Oh,
room, Gordy.
this
I
is-
can tell it really excites you.
Well, it does. Look at this. Look at the old historical signs you
Yes,
got in here.
We need to find a way to relocate those. I don't know the history of those, but they obviously refer to local things.
Franklin Academy, there's one right on the top, and I've already mentioned to our viewers how I'd love to stop and read those. Look at this old jack here, for example.
Yep. That's not for your car.
No, that would take this building, I think,
I think so.
up and no. Goodness knows what this doorway is and where that was. I wonder if that was on the porch in the front of the old porch.
I
on the
wouldn't be
front.
surprised. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, look at the bell. I didn't even see the bell. 1850 something. Troy, New York, 1853 or 1855. There were
53, I think.
There were two foundries in Troy, and one was on one side of the river and one on the other side of the river, and ultimately these brothers competed against each other and made most of the bells for all over New York State, including several that are in our churches. What the heck is this? Is some kind of a railroad switching device or something. That's what that is, from the railroad. Oh boy, we're gonna run out of tape before we're through here. But Ted, if somebody would like to,
We can. I don't think that. By the way, this is an old millstone.
I saw this. Isn't this beautiful?
Interest.
Yes, it is to me. I love it.
There's not much in here that's very photogenic. We use it more for storage of stuff. There are. I'm not sure what that is. That's some kind of processing thing for agricultural stuff, and I don't know what it is.
Beautiful stuff.
There is a hole upstairs, you see, and I have never been up there. Someone was just telling me the other day there's neat stuff up there, but I don't even know. The stairs are secure and we can do it. You may have enough already.
Well, I think we probably just about have a tape full, but I want to make a couple of points before we leave. Number one, I want to let people know that there is a great deal of history that must be preserved, especially the appreciation of that history, not just here in Malone, but throughout this entire county and this region. The fact that you do have a network of historians and a group of people who react and interact with each other to preserve that history. And I think it's very important because, as Calvin mentioned a while ago, it's almost like Franklin County is split in two parts, and you have people who are very active up around the Saranac Lake area, for example.
That's right. We have, in fact, historians in every town in the county, and some other organizations like Historic Saranac Lake and the Wilder Association. There are some other associations. There are also several villages in the county which have their own historians. So it becomes a matter of pulling together these threads of interest so we use our resources well. We could be duplicating things that we don't need to duplicate, and that's something that we're just really getting into now, is how to coordinate the work of historians throughout the county.
We can always use volunteers. You've already described how vital they are to your efforts here.
Oh, yeah.
But if somebody out there would like to join your association, and how would they go about that? Just contact you directly?
At this point, the best way is to drop us a note or give us a call at the number that was mentioned earlier. We have an address, a simple address in Malone. It's Post Office Box 388. And so people can write to us. We have a whole new development of email and website use. And at this point, we do not have the website in a situation where we can use it to bring members, to enroll members. But that will they'll develop over the next few months, so we'll keep an eye out for a link to the House of History website.
It's called the House of History. It's in Malone. If you haven't been here, I hope you've enjoyed this program, and I hope you look it up. Our special thanks to you, Ted Mills, for having us here today, to Peggy and Bonnie, and all the unseen little people who help you volunteering and work with your organization. It's been, I hope we relate to you the fact that we're really inspired by this visit here today.
Well, it's great.
And by what you do.
It's great to have you here. You bring out our own enthusiasm, and obviously there's a lot of it. And it's a pleasure to have you here.
Keep doing what you do. We like the way you're doing business. And who knows where we're going to be next time for our little corner.